Hello, hello. This is uh, wrong button. Hello, hello. This is it's 4 p.m. here in Brussels. Let me see if I can get the right screen this time. Yeah, there you go. It is 4:02 here in Brussels. Today I'm not streaming from Berlin, my home. I'm streaming from Brussels. I just got here not even 10 minutes ago at the hotel. Things are a little bit hectic. Everybody's here for FOSDEM, so quite a lot of people on a plane from Berlin to Brussels coming for FOSDEM, and perhaps more importantly, even to Hotel Unplugged. My name is Juraci. I'm a software engineer, and for quite some time I've been doing telemetry systems. And every other Friday, or now more frequently than before, I open a live stream here at Telemetry Drops, or in Portuguese at Dose de Telemetria, where I talk about open telemetry, observability, sometimes monitoring as well, but mostly focused on telemetry systems. And our focus is on open telemetry. So this is where we focus on. This is what I've been doing since 2019. So since the very beginning of the project, and what we've been doing for a few weeks now is I've been receiving guests, people who know about the specific parts of OpenTelemetry better than others, and they come here and talk and show and spread a little bit of knowledge. So last week we had, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago? No, last week we had Jason Plum from Splunk, and we had also Bruno Batista from IBM, and they both talk about OpenTelemetry SDK, more specifically performance, more specifically Java. So we talked about Java, the performance overhead, or what is the overhead of the Java SDK, and we talked a lot about that and a lot of nuances. And if you don't know what is the gist of the conversation, go there on the YouTube channel or on the LinkedIn page, and you can see what we discussed there. Very insightful conversation there. And today we're going to have another very insightful conversation about open telemetry blueprints, or observability blueprints, or which one is it, with Dan Blanco. But before calling Dan here to the conversation, just a couple of comments. First one is, we have on telemetrydrops.com, we are having our first cohort, our public cohort, for the specialization itself, and it is running for the next 4 months. So people, it's not open. If you want to do it, send a message or get to the hotel track. If you are on the hotel track, then you have priority for the specialization. So and those videos that we have there, it's not complete yet. So we are recording new modules every week, but that is very fresh. That's new content. That's content that is very current. That is very up to date. Besides that, so we have here, as I mentioned already, we have Hotel Unplugged this week here in Brussels. And we have KubeCon in a few weeks, or by the end of March, so not a few weeks, a couple of months perhaps, in Amsterdam, so close here to Brussels. The schedule for KubeCon is really good, especially for Observability Day. So not that KubeCon itself is not good, but they both are really very good this year. So if you are thinking about going to KubeCon, hurry up. I hear that the tickets, they are either already sold out or they're about to get sold out. So if you are thinking, stop thinking and get your tickets right now. I'm also doing some experiments with content. I have a lot of content about OpenTelemetry, so I'm doing some experiments there. The next experiment that I'm running, that I'm giving you the next few weeks perhaps, is I'm not going to give you any spoilers. So in a few weeks' time, I'm going to come to you and give you something to try out, and you're going to tell me whether this is good or not. One of the things that I'm experimenting with is on my free time, things that I'm having fun, is the quiz that I mentioned on LinkedIn the other day. So if you think that you know OpenTelemetry, go there, LinkedIn on my profile. Yesterday, I published a question. And if you're not going to KubeCon, I can share a document with you with a few questions that you can help me see if it's good or if the quiz is a flop. So you tell me. With that all said, I'm going to call here now Dan. Let's see if I can. Yes. Hi. Hey, Dan. How are you
doing? How's it going?
Good. So
I was going to say I should probably say that I'm grateful you made it. I was waiting. Is it going to make it? Like did it? So yeah, you made it.
Yeah. So everybody knows Dan, but for the few people in the row that haven't read Dan's book on open telemetry, for the few people who don't know Dan yet, so who's Dan?
Hi, yeah, I'm Dan. I'm a principal observability architect at New Relic, and yeah, what I do here is I help to basically apply best practices in observability. Of course, a majority of that would be open telemetry, and but I jump across yeah, multiple areas of observability from, I don't know, incident management to all the way down to instrumentation, right? I'm also part of the hotel community. I've been part of the governance committee with Jurassic until last October, and I'm also maintainer of the end user SIG, the special interest group. And in both of my roles, I guess, in open telemetry and New Relic, I try to bring the voice of the end user, right, to understand what problems we're trying to solve. And this is why I also wrote that book, Practical Open Telemetry, to get the angle of like, how do you apply, that to I guess, to the field, right? Yeah, and part of that as well is building platforms on top of hotel. I've been a platform engineer for over, I guess, almost 15 years. I think, we didn't have really platform engineering as a thing, but we were building internal platforms in many large organizations already. So yeah, I've been in that for a long time.
That's very cool. So can we say, would it be fair to say that the book is the groundwork, is the preparation for blueprints? Like the blueprints is the result of what you've learned and what you've written in the book, or is it a portion of it?
A portion of it. I think, I was thinking recently that if I were to do a second edition of it, I sometimes get asked that question. If you were to rewrite it, what would you do? And I think there's two parts of the book that are like, the first one related to why we need observability, and the last one related to how do you actually get all these things and these, concepts and apply them at scale, like the cultural part of it. So I think if I were to like, do a second edition, I would focus more on the cultural aspects, or the best practices in terms of like, hey, what problems are we trying to solve? How do we connect the dots between all these things? And less perhaps on the, hey, here's the SDK, here's how it works. I think the OTel documentation is great at that already, right? So I would try to focus more on the other aspects.
So many questions that I have.
So I guess
one of them,
answering your question is those two. Perhaps the last part of the book is the one that has been, I guess, that and all the conversations that I have with end users, the challenges that they face. That's what really, I guess, prompted me to say, hey, we should be doing these hotel blueprints, right?
and you were at another company. You were at an end user back then, right? And is I understand that the book is the result of that experience, like of you trying to bring observability and open telemetry specifically to that company. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I used to lead observability at Skyscanner before I joined New Relic, so I was an end user. And yeah, so there was a transformation towards providing, a platform as a product for observability with open telemetry as that abstraction layer to have an interaction mode between, let's say, the platform team, the observability team, and the rest of the organization. So this book was the I guess the experience driving that change over a couple of years, and then of course the community as well. I was already talking to other end users, learning from people, learning from both maintainers, from end users, and that's how I got into the community. Really, that's how I got into the hotel community from the end user side, right?
And you developed those initial blueprints at Skyscanner, right? So you started doing blueprints or architecture references at Skyscanner before proposing
Yes,
that to hotel.
I guess a bit more. I guess this is one of the things that, by the way, for people that are not familiar with the way that open telemetry handles projects, doesn't make sense for me to explain what we're talking about in terms of hotel blueprints, because I think it is a project proposal. So a project in open telemetry is an initiative, right? Is a new initiative. We were trying to bring people across many different SIGs, special interest groups, but also end users in this case, in the industry, in a way that allows us to drive a cross-functional, cross-cutting like change. In this case, Observability Blueprints is one of those. So yeah, I think to your question, yes, when I was a Skyscanner, I was driving blueprints. Blueprints or strategic thinking is the way I like to talk about it as well, from the perspective of like going from a particular set of problems to solve, and then tying all together to how do you apply that at scale, right? How do you go from like, we need to solve these problems, and how do we do that at scale? The way that we're trying to approach that in hotel can't be the same way, because different companies have different problems. So what we're trying to do with hotel blueprints, and we can go into more detail in later, is trying to try to identify some common challenges and some common environments, and try to group them together into something that can, if you identify with these problems, you might find a solution by following these guidelines and these actions, right?
Got it. So we got into the problems part of the situation. Like, those are the problems here. Who's the audience? Who'd be having those problems that you're mentioning?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that when we think about, if you think about a strategy, the first thing that you need to think about is what problems are you trying to solve, and who is the audience, or who's going to be the driver of that change, and who is going to be the receiver of that change, right? So it depends. I think this is one of the things where, if you're doing this within your organization, within your company, you're trying to drive change, you probably, let's say that, you are the observability team. You operate in a modern, like, platform engineering driven, so like domain driven design type of organization. So you understand that you've got the observability domain, you're the owner of that, and you want to provide a stable experience for the rest of the company, try to reduce and generate efficiency. So I'm already, I guess, thinking of like, what are the main problems that they're trying to solve? The main problem is like people reinventing the wheel and to do the same thing, or having the same consolidated view of like business specific or domain specific semantic conventions across the space. So that's some of the problems that particular platform team tries to solve. But there may be other blueprints or other strategies that are more related to, I don't know, you've got like an operations team that is in charge of their network devices for, in a data center. Like that's another, that is perhaps less, cool these days, but it's another use of open telemetry. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's very difficult for people to approach hotels sometimes, because it's so broad, as it covers so many different fields,
Yes.
so many different environments. It's not like, I guess if you have another cloud native project that is specific to, I don't know, I don't want to name anything, but networking in Kubernetes, right? That is networking in Kubernetes. It's not gonna be applied to, I don't know, the way that you do monitoring in IoT devices, or it's not the same, right? With hotel is super broad. So I think what we're trying to do is like zooming in to particular environments and seeing how we approach that there.
Yeah, one question that I got the other day was, how about mainframes, and like how to use OpenTelemetry with mainframes? And like, it's such a broad question, and it's very hard to point people to locations where they can learn about OTel for mainframes. There's a SIG, of course, but then pointing people to the meeting notes for the SIG is not very helpful. So this is where I think that.
Yeah, also like, even if you have a SIG for mainframes, that's just probably only part of the story, right? Because you've got the mainframe, but then you've got like the usage of that in production by perhaps interactions with, or I guess, how does that interact with other parts of their ecosystem that maybe come with it? I mean, I don't know much about mainframes, but there's maybe the SIG is focused on one thing in particular. Otherwise, the way I like to think about it is like collectors, for example. Like everyone runs hotel collectors. The documentation on collectors is great. And then we've got like deployment patterns for collectors, but you don't operate them in a vacuum, right? So so these blueprints are going to be like tying the SDK config on one side, for example, for each of the languages. How do companies other approach it to connect or provide I guess an experience across a stable experience for the rest of the engineers in their companies, right?
Yeah, I think it helps a lot end users in seeing what other people are doing, or how people building open telemetry, how we envision the technology being used with all the building blocks that we provide. Like I like to say, or I like to think that open telemetry is very good at providing the building blocks, so you can pick and choose whatever you want. You can use SDK without API, and vice versa. You don't have to use a collector, but you can. But it also has this philosophy of better is included that we inherited from open census. Like we give you everything if you need. You have the API, you have the SDK, you have a collector if you need, and it's better together. It works nicely together. But then when we look for an end user, it's so hard because so many things. Like how do I use this whole thing? And blueprints could be a way for us in the community telling people this is how you can use this, and also from the community, from people coming to us and saying this is how I'm using, and very successfully, or not very successfully with that component, but with that other component together, then it might work.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is it also kind of forces us maintainers, or I can't speak as a maintainer anymore, but it also forces the people building the technology to stop for a moment and think like, how do I actually envision people using that? Like it's very easy to do code and just throw code at the wall, but then how it all fits together. And I think the blueprints are very good for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's another intention is both for end users. I mean, clearly that's the best, the most important audience of this of blueprints will be the end user that is trying to adopt it, or the end user that wants to share how they're adopting it. But there's an element of it as well that I think is the maintainers seeing how easy it is to adopt OTel, or perhaps gaps, but that we know, hey, the reason that we have this blueprint and we have this sort of like list of actions to follow is because we don't have X, right? So maybe we can improve the experience there, and we can streamline the experience in this blueprint. So we don't intend the blueprint to be, or each of the blueprints to be a one-off thing. We intend the blueprints to be more of a living document that adapts as new things come into, new features or new products or new ways of doing things come into OpenTelemetry, right? So so I think that it can be as well something that is given back to the maintainers. I like the way I like to think it is like the way I like to think about it is, if you, in a simple way, is like if you had a list of things that a sysadmin would do, like let's say back in the day, and just go and execute something in like the command line and like deploy this, deploy that. Well, that's very inefficient. Like you take that and say, okay, let's streamline that, and then we'll give you better tools to do that, right?
You made me feel old now, Dan. Sysadmin. I was once sysadmin just before being a webmaster back in the days. Okay, so you got me curious now. So how we talked about the whys and the audiences and the good things. Now, how does that actually look like? Can you show us like one blueprint, or show us how does that look like in practice?
Yeah. So in practice, the general idea, and this is something that we just kicked off as I said, a new project. And so I just heard a noise. Is it okay?
That's just my backpack that fell. I told you I came very in a hurry and got here like 2 minutes before I turned on the camera with that. Everything is like messy here, so the backpack just got on the floor.
Cool.
Anyway.
I could share. What we're trying to come up now with, the first thing is a template for a blueprint that can be easy to follow later, right? So that's I was saying that we are, we just kicked off this new initiative. There's a group of people. We meet every couple of weeks. So there is the end user special interest group, the end user SIG meeting, and is 1 week is focused on the end user, on all the other things that the end user SIG is doing, which is a lot. And then we have the other week is just focusing on blueprints, right? So it's alternating weeks. And so have a group of people, that we're discussing currently the template and the way that we're going to deliver these blueprints. And then we're also going to be discussing the scope of blueprints that we're going to deliver for the first phase, right? And a bit of a very lightweight process for how we take more blueprints in the future. So the idea here is that we the way that it will look like is based on, and I'm going to go into a bit of like strategy or strategic thinking. Like, it was like one of the most influential books that I've ever read was Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumelt. And this inspired like much of my thinking and the way that I think about problems. And it's very clear on like how you structure a strategy, and a blueprint needs to be like that. So it has three main blocks. And three main blocks that get adored, like basically then are decorated with a summary and an appendix. But the main three blocks are, the first one being what Rumelt calls it the diagnosis, but is in this case with like the common challenges, right? Which are the common problems that we want to solve? And you don't think about solutions until you clearly define the problems, right? So these are the problems to solve, and you just start with that. Then the second part that you focus on is what they call like guiding policies, but I'll just call them like guidelines. I want to like make the language more easier to consume, right? Guidelines. So some common guidelines common problems, common guidelines. So these guidelines are general, like a bit more, I guess, high level. So like guidelines, for example, if you have a problem and they need to apply to one of the problems to solve, right? So if you're saying, hey, we have a problem our problem is that each of my teams is configuring the OTel SDK completely differently, which means that, we'll get some semantic or some resource attributes in some teams, some resource attributes in others, or even like context propagation is configured in a completely different way. So the guiding policy or the guideline, the common guideline will provide a default extensible config baked into your CI pipelines or into your deployment as well, which you could do with the operator, for example, with the OTel operator. But that's the implementation side. So that comes third. So that's the third block. The third block is, now you've got the guideline. The guideline is you provide that stable config. How do you do that? Is a third block, which is the implementation. So the actions. So either like, have the operator injecting config for your workloads in Kubernetes. If you don't run in Kubernetes, you might have a base Docker image that has, some config in it. So that's one way of doing that. So the way that it reads is like, here's the problem, here's the common guideline that should solve a problem, and here is the actions that should implement each of the guidelines. And that way it reads in a way that at the end of the day, you have a set of actions that solve problems, not a set of actions without context, right? That's the idea.
Understood. So where do you see the blueprints being used on a daily workflow of the audience there? Is that when I'm learning OpenTelemetry? Is that when I'm about to start a new internal project in a specific direction, or is it on my daily basis? Like every morning I look at it and see if I'm still there.
I see them when someone is thinking about a transformation or like a big project. Basically, that's how I see them, because I think right now our documentation in OTel is really good for getting started. So the way that I see it is like blueprint should be for someone that's already familiar with what OpenTelemetry is, what a collector is, how you configure a collector, how you configure the SDK. So all the other bits of the documentation, like you should be somehow familiar with it. The blueprint is okay, I've done this. I've got the getting started part nailed. And now I want to like day 2 operations or day 3 operations. Like, how do I operate this at scale? How do I make sure that, every developer in my company is using OTel and they're using it well? How do I scale my collectors to a load of like however million spans per second, right? So so that's the idea.
So I think I now have a different understanding of the audience than I had before. What I understood before is that it can be somewhat broad of an audience. Like I was thinking perhaps developers could get a blueprint on how do I instrument my applications. But now when I think about that after your explanation now, it doesn't feel like that. Like I think developers willing to instrument their code should just go to the main documentation. And blueprints, they are really for the observability engineers, as we are calling them. It doesn't matter if their titles, official titles, are platform engineers or SREs. Those are the two main audiences for Hotel. But they are they are observability engineers at the end of the day, and they are the target, I think.
I think that so far, yes. I think this will evolve, right? I think, I don't know, in the future maybe there will be a blueprint for the more, hey, how do you instrument, as you said? Maybe that's a good idea for the future. For future, like one of the things that we want to do with blueprints is try to identify the audience at the start to say, hey, who is this for, right? So maybe in the future there is something related to how do we take an application and actually think about metrics versus traces versus logs, and if you're adding your own instrumentation, how do you do it with in a way that is like quality instrumentation? Like,
Yeah.
forgot the name that you used it a few times, Jurassic. It's like mindful. No, is it mindful instrument?
Purposeful. I mean, I use purposeful, but you use something similar. You used another term. But yes, the idea is a purposeful
Yeah,
instrumentation.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh my God, I had another question right out of that here. People in the audience, if you do have questions, you should write those questions down. Dan is here. Dan is here to answer your questions. But then, I don't know. I think when I think about those, the getting started and so on, I think as a developer, oh yeah, I know where I was going. As a developer, I might not even know where to look for those blueprints. I might not even know that they exist, right? So, I guess this is where I ask this. In this world of AI, is this going to be useful? Can you see where does AI fit into the blueprints here?
Oh, spicy. No, I think it can help. In the same way that we're both involved in instrumentation score project, like side of Hotel, which I've seen people feed in like the instrumentation score like practices to Claude, and basically just use that to write good instrumentation, right? Yeah, I think that can be useful in different ways, right? So if you're trying to, perhaps, you can use that as a context to write your own blueprint, perhaps. These are the common challenges, but like maybe you then want to say, hey, here's my context. This is the way that my company operates. And I don't know how much we want to go into the operational modes of or interaction modes in companies, which I think that fascinates me as well. The team topologies and we can go a bit, I think we need to keep it closer to Hotel sometimes. But yeah, so I think someone can take that and go like, hey, this is the way that I operate. What are other companies doing? What is the, if you feed in the blueprint, how do you apply that to I think that could be a way to use it as well. And to help people communicate value as well of Hotel. So that, hey, if we adopt Hotel, we have these problems, right? And we are suffering from like low engineering efficiency, or we're suffering from like like lack of correlation in our data, suffering from and that involves like results in higher time to resolve incidents, or we're suffering from like a lack of business specific data in our telemetry, and then we don't detect failures when they happen because our customers are suffering from something, and we're looking at, I don't know, CPU utilization, right? So these are things that someone can identify with in their company and say, well, actually, these actually apply to me, and I would like to use maybe an LLM to help me craft a strategy for myself.
So you were saying that, and you made me feel old again, because right after being a sysadmin and a webmaster, I became a Java developer. I mean, after Perl developer and so on, I became a Java developer. And as a Java developer, of course, I had to get familiar with the Gang of Four design patterns.
Yep.
And what you were saying now just reminds me of that. Like, I have problems. Help me find the patterns that I can solve, that people have solved these patterns in the past. So I think that aspect of the design of the blueprints, they really have this connection with design patterns from the Gang of Four, like from the, I don't know, the 90s or 2000s. I don't know.
Yeah. I also
But I think the other thing that I was thinking about was, like, I've seen many people coming to the OpenTelemetry collector SIGs and Slack channels and so on, asking how can I do tail sampling as like scalable tail sampling.
Yeah.
Some people would just scream and say, no, you cannot do that with OpenTelemetry. OpenTelemetry is not for that. You should use our fancy tool here.
Yeah.
But others would say, no, you can do that. Here's how we are doing. This is what actually one of the reasons why I did the deployment patterns back in 2020 or so. And I think when I talked about AI, one of the ideas, one of the cases that I had in mind for the blueprints would be, I have the blueprint for a scalable tail sampling solution here, and I have my collectors running on my Kubernetes cluster right now. Can you match it? Like, why is it not working, or is it following the? Perhaps I'm seeing blueprints as too strict to the term blueprint, like for engineering, like a blue paper and white markings and so on. And I see the implementation, like what is running right now in my Kubernetes cluster as the actual house that was built on top of or based on the blueprint. So perhaps AI LLMs could match the blueprint with the reality. Like, is it really matching, or is anything missing?
True. I do see that, and like, I don't know, if we were to think about that blueprint for, hey, how do I approach the decisions between, or the interaction between metrics and traces, right, and spans, because I have been like, this is another thing that I think is worth talking about, is that a lot of the end users that are adopting OTel are also doing that as part of other modernization initiatives, right? So they might have a really big backlog of, like, I was going to use a bad word, but really bad telemetry, and they look at OTel as a way to get, like, okay, let's do it well this time. Like, we had like really high cardinality metrics because we didn't have like tracing. So now, like, let's use metrics for what they are best at, and then start to use like wide events, or like, spans, or that pattern, right? Same with logs, or so if you were to, like, going back to the AI thing, sometimes if you were to go in and say, hey, Claude, go in, or whatever tool, go in and change all my metrics that I was using this obscure like API that I built myself that can generate metrics, go and translate that, move that to OTel, and it will do it. It'll do it, like, do a great job at it. But the data is still bad, right? So like, it will not make a decision, like, probably in like, hey, well, you shouldn't really use a metric here. You should use a span over here, or even like point that to an MCP server and go like, maybe you already have that auto instrumented in your workload at the moment. Like, you don't need to even create this metric, right? So that's the idea of I guess feeding in that context of good telemetry or good design patterns.
Yeah. The channel, I think, on YouTube is marked as not for kids, so you can definitely use other words for bad telemetry.
Right, I was going to say, there's a lot of shitty telemetry out there. But
that's what I could see you doing. And for those who don't know, Dan is actually the author of There's a Lot of Bad Telemetry Out There tagline that we use at Oligarden. Oligarden is another hat, so we are here at Telemetry Drops, so not talking about Oligarden. I would really go into the like AI coding part just to say that, but no, that's Oligarden, so we are not talking about Oligarden today here. But then, what do you? So two things now. One is, what is the current state of the proposal, and second, what do you need from the community, from users and from maintainers. I
Cool.
think that there might be different asks for the different audiences, but I
Yeah.
think the first question is, what is the current state of the proposal?
Yeah, so the current state is approved. So, and actually it's moving really fast, right? So it's been approved. It was approved 2 weeks ago, and we already have, like, the first draft of the template for, not for a blueprint, but the template for the blueprint. So at the moment, I would say that if people are interested, go into the GitHub repo, the community repo within the Open Telemetry GitHub org, and then you'll see that there is all the calendar there. So if you're not familiar with it, there's the calendar of the different SEG meetings. We are meeting, the next one will be in 2 weeks. So like, next week, actually next week, Thursday next week is another meeting of the Blueprints, group. And yeah, so we're looking now for people that want to collaborate into some of the 3 blueprints that, well, we're looking to scope what we want to do with these 3 first blueprints. The first one I think we had a discussion, and one will be around providing a telemetry platform, as in, like, how do you configure the SDK, the collector gateway, and so on. Another one more related to, like, observing Kubernetes and Kubernetes native workloads. So that will include both the Kubernetes monitoring and the new, well, soon stable semantic conventions, and also the aspects related to Prometheus interoperability, perhaps. So again, we're trying to scope what to put in each of them. And then another one more related to legacy, more, I guess, bare metal or VM like type of observability. So again, we're looking for is feedback now on, like, are these the good, the ones that we should focus on, and then when we're going to have a process for I guess proposing new blueprints and proposing new reference architectures. Actually, I forgot to mention this. There is another aspect for end users that I think we're trying to collect reference architectures as well. So there are 2 things. One is a blueprint, which is like trying to find some common patterns, and blueprints will be ultimately backed by reference architecture. So say, okay, well, I've followed this blueprint, or this is what the blueprint was based on, and there are this and this company that followed them, and this is how they, more like a one-off thing. In December 2025, this is what this company was doing in terms of observability, right? So I guess that is both of these things is how end users can help us, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Do you need the company name to be stated? I mean, I've seen quite a lot of people that they say, well, it is proprietary for the company, so I cannot put the name of the company there, but I can certainly tell, like, in general terms, how we've done.
That is a good question. We can discuss that. I think for reference architectures, I think we probably, yes. I don't know. I think it would be. I know that some companies it's difficult. Other companies, for them, even having a framework where they can, even just them having a framework that they can show, I guess, their PR or legal team, that was already enough, right? So, like, look, they're not going to ask me about how we make money. They're going to ask me about hotel, right? Yeah.
Cool. We have a few questions here. First one, Michael. I'd like to have blueprints motivate teams to shift from auto-based instrumentation to further fine-tune the setup, reducing noise. Yes, please do that. For instance, the DevOps, so the question continues here on the side. So the DevOps group sets up an operator-driven tail sampling setup. Featured teams can collaborate on what it takes to trace their ideal customer persona. What's your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think the blueprints should help with, and I think this is where, like, I would like to get a little bit into the interaction modes between different types of engineers, right? So you've got the DevOps or the observability team that can set up the stable or standard config, but that's not going to get you far. You need the individual owners of service owners to then add their own business specific telemetry, right? So yeah, absolutely, I agree with that, and these should help with that, because actually that's one of the things of hotel that sometimes we don't focus enough on, which is that this decoupling of API and SDK, and like having this really clear separation between like developers should care about the API and then maybe not so much about the SDK unless they really need it. And if they need it, then you should enable them to apply new config that they need in their own way, in a standard way, right? So yeah, I do think that they would help with this as well. Yeah.
Cool. Michiel, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Ping me on LinkedIn. I can send you something to read. I think you're gonna like. Very, very close to what you're saying here. The other comment comes from YouTube. Aren't the problem statements and the solutions on a high level the same, and the blueprint then becomes a tailored roadmap? And the roadmap depends on the tech stack, misuse of concepts, maturity, and so on. For instance, if you want another one. So if you want to be a successful tech company, you need to measure time spent on bugs, debugging, operating.
Yeah, I think this will be like similar to the scope that we're trying to. Sorry, I was reading that as well. Yeah, so if you want to be a successful tech company, you want to measure time spent on bugs, debugging, operating. Blueprints can be too big, right? I think this is like where the scope will be important to agree before we actually even like start writing a blueprint. There are some things like clearly, yeah, you need to spend time wherever, like identify the drivers for your company in terms. One thing is like observability maturity, right? Global. And another thing I think what we're trying to go here is like towards like how can OpenTelemetry help? And we need to be careful here. We're like, whatever, there's other things that that the observability industry may recommend in one way or another that we don't really want to get into because OTel is just about OTel, right? So yeah, maybe like someone would recommend, hey, you shouldn't run different backends for different signals, or that this is too. I think that shouldn't be in scope of an OTel blueprint, because that is a discussion about how you use your observability backend. And I think there's a valid point there, because you can point all your data to one backend, like your own on-prem or a vendor out there, and you can use it very well or you can use it very badly. I mean, that will affect those things like how fast you debug something. So I think we're not going to go into that in OTel blueprints. But I do think that going back to the original question, and problem statements, the solutions in a high level, sort of, but you need to start with a problem to be able to get to a solution. Like if you think about like solution, sometimes we miss that. Why are we even doing this? And we're overcomplicating things without a need for it, right? So yeah, I guess I don't know if that helps answer and scope a little bit what we're trying to do with OTel blueprints, but yeah.
So do you think that the blueprint then, so the line that you're drawing is where OpenTelemetry stops, the blueprint stops as well? Like one thing is very clear for OTel, which is we are not a visualization tool. Like we are not going to be a visualization tool. We are an instrumentation and collection of telemetry. So we generate the telemetry close to the application and we send telemetry elsewhere. And that's what we do. Right. Is that what you see for blueprints as well?
Yeah, like, that's the way I see it, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think is a sometimes bit of a fuzzy line, because like perhaps not on the vendor or the observability tool side, more on the deployment side. So Ott there was basically mentioned the tech stack. Yeah, the tech stack matters, right? However, like for example, if you deploy in Kubernetes, yeah, that's something that, well, it will be different than deploying on a VM, right? So that's why blueprints should be separate in that case. In terms of like, for example, if you deploy on certain cloud provider or another, that starts to get a bit more like, well, I'm not sure we should have a blueprint for one cloud provider, right? For example, that should be their responsibility. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I think I understand now what I mean. So just to check my understanding, what you're saying is we could be having a blueprint that says your debug logs should go to a blob storage, like a local storage, a disk or whatever, in your cluster. And then your critical logs from your critical services and your warns, like all of your warnings and errors and like above info, they should all go to your vendor, or those should all go to your I don't know, logging storage somewhere. It can be a commercial vendor, it can be open source, but different types of storage for different types. Like, would that be acceptable for the blueprint in our case?
Or, I think so. Yeah, And then even like we were talking about this last week, or the week before, and in our first, it was a kickoff meeting, and that was like already a really good conversation. And it was like when we recommend tools, someone mentioned like, do we recommend? Where do we stop recommending tools? It's like, well, if it's something in it's a cloud, a CNCF project, and it will help in this particular blueprint to do something related to hotel, I think that's okay. If it's a commercial offering, then no. So that's,
it can get complicated, and you can get complicated. There are some projects within even, and I say that as a CNCF ambassador, there are some projects within the CNCF that are very close to specific vendors, then been very, very open. So
I think it's difficult to say, but some of them are like de facto standards, right, in a way. So
yes. Dan, we're almost at, we're 18 minutes over time. I hope that it's okay for you. But I have one more question, which is, what is the one question that I should have asked you, but I didn't? Like, what should I know about blueprints that I didn't ask you before?
Oh, I wasn't ready for this.
Sorry.
I got one. When is what's the time frames, right? Because I think that's one of the things. We're not trying to, as I said, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. So I think we intend to have at least 3 blueprints in the next 3 months or so. So I think that's the intention. So it's open source. I think, we're not holding people accountable for like not meeting their deadlines, but we do try to, this is one of the things that I was, quite passionate about. And when I was in governance, I guess that was like, people do want to have some type of like idea when things will be complete, right? And it's okay if then, well, you don't meet the deadline, well, you just update the project and say, well, or the timelines. But yeah, our intention at the moment, I think we're good on that. Looking at all the, I guess the collaboration that we're seeing, I think we're good on that. It will be in the next 2 or 3 months. We'll have 3 blueprints, and then close the project. We'll have a process. We'll have a bit of learnings from that, a template, and it'll be more streamlined to create new ones. So yeah, and then we'll see what happens.
You know what would be really cool? To have a contrib session in Salt Lake City, KubeCon Salt Lake City, where people could contribute their blueprints.
Or reference architectures. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that would be really cool. And maybe that can be the anonymous ones, but we can say anonymous person contributed this. Because otherwise it's difficult. I was thinking, how do you contribute anonymously on GitHub? Is difficult.
Folks, thank you very much for attending. Dan, thank you very much for coming here and talking about blueprints. If you like this conversation here, engage. Like Carla is the person who runs Telemetry Drops from Mondays to Fridays. I only come in here like for half an hour, or when I'm not traveling, when I'm at home, then I take care of like recording the new videos and so on in the mornings. But Carla is the one that handles, and she asks me always like, tell people to hit the thumbs up button or follow the LinkedIn page and so on. So if you like this, do that. And if you have a blueprint to contribute, talk to Dan. Dan, where can people find you?
You can find me on the CNCF Slack, Dan Gomez Blanco, or on GitHub as well, Daniel G. Blanco, or on LinkedIn, any of those 3.
Are you coming to Unplugged as well?
I will be there. Unfortunately, I won't be at FOSDEM, but I will join for Hotel Unplugged.
Nice, cool. Dan, thank you very much, man.
All right, thank you. Cheers.
Bye.